he invited me to consider writing his and his wife's biography, I think in 2016 or 2017, which was a real honor for me. Right? He had asked me to do take on other research projects before that, but this was significant, right? One of the things that's simply true about Morris is that he's written lots of people's biographies over time. The bulk, in some ways, of his scholarship has been telling the stories of Brethren in Christ people and institutions. So I think it was especially meaningful to be invited to tell his story. As someone who has written lots of stories of people, that he saw in me the ability to do that was really meaningful. I would say that writing Morris's biography has reinforced some of the ways that I saw him when I was a student in his classroom, or when I was, a colleague working alongside him in the Historical Society and with the Historical Journal. It has, reminded me of the importance of the work that he's done for the church in helping us to preserve our history, in helping to popularize our history, and invite other people to care about these important stories from our past. Morris also published a book, his first book of biographies. It was called 9 Portraits, and it told 9 different stories of Brethren in Christ church leaders from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. His work, again, is both a product of his life, but it's also a primary source about, what's going on in the church at this time, right? How do we see his work as something that is being shaped by the time period in which he's writing it? One of the things that I'm really wanting to stress in my writing of this biography is that it's a joint biography, right? That it's the story of Morris's life, but it's also the story of Leon, his wife of over 70 years. One of the things that I really want to stress in the biography is that Morris and Leon had a marriage that would have been considered quite egalitarian for the time. They were married in the early 1950s. When we think historically about the relationship between the sexes at that period of time, right? Especially in the church, there was often certain ideas about male headship, right, or men kind of being the breadwinners, right, and women being in kind of a subordinate role. But Morris and Leon, from what I can tell from the records that I have at my disposal, had in some ways a different relationship there, right, a much more egalitarian relationship where, say, the division of labor in the household wasn't necessarily divided along gendered lines, right? Morris did a lot of the cooking, right, and the preparation of food in the household. Having said that, I think there are also ways in which we can see in the story of their lives some of the gendered dynamics of the church at that time. But her work, again, behind the scenes, made it possible for Morris to do the kind of work that he did. And I think without a partner like Leon, Morris wouldn't have been able to accomplish the things that he accomplished in his life. And so that's one of the things that I really want to stress in the biography, is that the partnership between these two individuals in marriage and in other ways really made possible Morris's work as a historian, as a storyteller. Honestly, we haven't had to meet that much because he's left such an amazing documentary record here in the archives. So one of the sources that I have access to for this project is a journal that he's been keeping since 1978. He donated the most recent year, 2022, a couple of months ago. And so we have a complete run from 1978 to 2022 of his experiences in the classroom, in his leadership in the Brethren in Christ Historical Society, of his work as a scholar. And so in many ways, Morris and I get to have conversations about the actual process of putting the book together rather than his life story, because I have such an amazing documentary record that allows me to really engage with his work and his life beyond just sort of oral history. And Morris is prolific, right? Morris has told the stories of others. He's also written his own stories in lots of ways, right? I mean, he had his most recent book is a set of it's a sort of memoir, right? It's a set of stories from his life. So there's no shortage of material for people who want to encounter his stories. and I can't replicate his stories, right? I'm a different kind of historian. I'm a different kind of writer than he is. And so, yeah, I want people in the biography to encounter Morris, to see him as a person. But I really hope that this biography can offer a kind of take on his legacy, right? And what contributions he has made to the church. My big argument in the biography is that Morris Sider has been the storyteller of the Brethren in Christ Church. And I mean that in some very specific ways, right? So he has told the story of the church. He has published numerous books, edited numerous books, told many different stories about many different parts of the church. He's told the stories of individuals from the church, ministers, missionaries, lay people, evangelists, right? Many different people who have contributed to the church and its work over time. He's told their stories. He's told the stories of church institutions. Messiah College, he wrote literally the history of Messiah College, many other institutions of the church as well. And so he's been a storyteller in the sense that he has helped us to understand the people and the communities that have formed and shaped our denomination. He's also been a storyteller in the sense of using the past to inspire Brethren in Christ people in the present and the future. So one of the claims that I make in the biography is that when Morris told these stories of people's biographies and stories of these institutions, he wasn't just telling these stories for the purposes of recording history, right, or setting down certain facts about the past. He was telling us these stories to help us envision what it might mean to be Brethren in Christ, both in the present and in the future. So he's been a storyteller in that sense as well. And when I say he's been a storyteller, I don't mean that as like I don't mean that in a negative way, right? I don't mean that as a slight on his credentials as a historian. Right? He's demonstrated the qualities of great historical writing throughout all of the books that he's written, engagement with primary sources, complexity, change over time, all of those things that we kind of that we emphasize when we do historical writing as historians. Morris is a very, very humble person. So I think even being asked what his legacy is, he would probably say, oh, it's very modest, right? He's a very humble person. But I hope, my hope, right, is that he's able to see some of the things that I just described, right? I hope that he's able to see the way that his work has made Brethren in Christ history accessible to a lot of people. Certainly to our church leaders, certainly to other scholars, but also to lay people in the pews who might otherwise not have known about some of these important figures from our history, or might not have known some of these important stories that really do help to illustrate who we have been as a church community and who we can be as a church community. So I hope that he recognizes the way that his work has been really important in giving Brethren in Christ people a sense of who we are, right? A sense of our identity as a community of followers of Jesus. So that's what I mean when I say, like, I want this biography to kind of capture his legacy, right? Or interpret his legacy for future generations of Brethren in Christ people. Like, he won't do that for himself, right? And so I want to be a person that can make that kind of contribution and to signal, like, this person has been very significant in our understanding of who we are as a church community, right? And without his influence, without his work, we would not know ourselves in the way that we know ourselves now. So I really do hope that comes through in the biography, and that it can be a statement about what he has given to the church throughout his calling and career.